Sometimes in life, God will whisper a word that shakes your comfort zone. Let it go. Not because what you're holding is bad, but because what He's bringing is better. You see, there are seasons when holding on becomes the very thing that keeps you from moving forward. God can't fill open hands. Letting go is one of the hardest things God ever asks of us because it challenges our deepest need for control. We hold tightly to what we know, the relationship we've built, the job we've worked for, the dream we've chased, and we think that if we can just keep our hands around it, everything will be all right. But when God says, let go, He's not trying to strip you of something valuable. He's inviting you to trust Him in a deeper way than you ever have before. Letting go is not about losing control. It's about shifting control. It's about moving the weight of your dependence from your own ability to His authority. Trust doesn't grow in the comfort zone. It grows in the space between what you understand and what you can't explain. When God tells you to release something, He's placing you in that space, the uncomfortable middle where faith becomes more than a word. It's easy to trust God when everything makes sense, when the plan is clear, when the outcome is visible. But real faith begins when you no longer have proof, only a promise. Letting go is your declaration that you believe the promise, even when you can't see the path. Abraham had to walk away from everything familiar when God said, go to a land I will show you. God didn't give him a map, just a word. Abraham had to let go of his comfort, his culture, and his certainty. And in return, he received a covenant that would bless generations. That's what happens when you let go. You make room for something eternal to take root. God never tells you to release what He doesn't plan to replace. The problem is, we often want the replacement before the release. We want to see what's next before we leave what's now. But God says, trust me first, then I'll show you what's next. When you let go, you're declaring that God is enough. You're saying, even if I lose this, I haven't lost everything because I still have Him. That's why He sometimes allows things to fall apart, not to punish you, but to purify your priorities. He wants to teach you that your peace can't depend on what you hold. It must depend on who holds you. The moment you start trusting Him with the things you can't control, you start discovering peace that can't be taken away. Letting go is also a spiritual test of maturity. Children cling, adults release. God calls you to grow to the place where you can say, Lord, I may not understand it, but I trust you enough to let it go. It might hurt. It might confuse you. It might even break your heart, but it won't break your destiny, because whatever you release into His hands, He has the power to resurrect. Sometimes the very thing you're afraid to let go of is what's holding back your blessing. You can't step into tomorrow while dragging yesterday behind you. You can't hold on to the past and reach for the promise at the same time. Letting go is the bridge between your history and your destiny. It's the spiritual act of saying, God, I'm done trying to fix what only you can heal. I'm done trying to control what only you can change. When you reach that point, heaven moves on your behalf. The peace that follows surrender is unlike anything the world can offer because it's born out of obedience. So when God says, let go, don't see it as loss, see it as positioning. He's not asking you to fall, He's asking you to fly. The hands that let go of what's temporary are the same hands that will rise to receive what's eternal. Trust doesn't mean you won't feel the pain of release, but it means you believe the purpose behind it. God is writing a new chapter, and He can't turn the page until you stop rereading the old one. So open your hands, loosen your grip, and let go, because the same God who's asking you to release is the God who's ready to redeem. When God removes something from your life, it's not to leave you empty. It's to prepare you for something greater. He never subtracts without the intention to multiply. But the challenge for most of us is that we focus so much on what's been taken that we can't see what's being made ready. When God takes away, it's never random. It's always redemptive. He removes in order to replace, but before He fills your hands with something new, He has to free them from what's old. Sometimes you have to lose what's comfortable to gain what's critical for your destiny. We often mistake God's pruning for punishment. When a branch is cut back, it feels painful, it looks smaller, and it seems like loss. But pruning is not about taking life, it's about making room for more life. Jesus said in John 15:2, every branch that bears fruit, he prunes so that it may bear more fruit. In other words, God cuts back what's working so that it can work better. The removal is never rejection, it's preparation. God sees what you cannot see. He knows that the thing you're holding might look good to you, but could be limiting what he wants to grow in you. When God removes people, positions, or possessions from your life, he's not trying to hurt you, he's trying to help you. Some people were meant to be chapters, not the whole book. Some opportunities were designed to teach you a lesson, not carry you to your destiny. But we often try to turn temporary assignments into permanent fixtures. We cry out, asking God why he took something away, when in truth, he's protecting us from something we can't yet perceive. Sometimes God removes what you want to save what you need. Think about the story of Jonah. God removed Jonah from his comfort, from his plan, even from the boat that seemed safe, because Jonah was heading in the wrong direction. The storm wasn't meant to destroy him. It was meant to redirect him. When God removes, he's not setting you back. He's setting you straight. He's positioning you in alignment with his purpose. That loss you didn't understand, that door that closed, that friendship that faded, it might just be God's way of moving you from what was good to what is divine. There are times when God has to clear your surroundings so he can shift your focus. As long as your attention is on what's gone, you'll miss what's growing. That's why he removes distractions, even when those distractions look like blessings. If he didn't take some things away, you'd never make space for what's next. Just like a seed must die before it brings forth fruit, something in your life sometimes has to end before new life begins. It's not easy. It hurts to watch something meaningful fade away. But faith is not the absence of pain. It's the presence of perspective. Faith says, God, even though I don't understand this removal, I trust that you're making room for something better. And that's the kind of trust that activates his replacement plan. God never leaves you stranded between loss and fulfillment. He uses that space to stretch your dependence on him. When Job lost everything, it looked like the end. But Job's story didn't stop with removal. It ended with replacement. God restored double what was taken because Job stayed faithful through the loss. That's the same principle at work in your life. If you can stay faithful when God removes, you'll be ready when he replaces. So don't mourn too long over what's gone. What God removes today, he intends to replace tomorrow. The closed door you're staring at might be hiding a greater one. It's about to open. When God removes, it's never to leave you barren. It's to make you fruitful. The hands that once held loss will soon hold increase. Trust the process, because every divine subtraction leads to a supernatural addition. God removes to replace, and when he replaces, it's always better than what you lost. One of the most difficult lessons in walking with God is learning that not every attachment is an assignment. There are people, opportunities, and seasons that enter your life by divine design, but that doesn't mean they're meant to stay forever. God often brings certain things into your path for a purpose, not permanence. When we mistake temporary attachments for lifelong assignments, we end up carrying things that were never meant to go the distance with us. The danger of confusing the two is that we start holding on to something God already used to move us to the next stage of our journey. Some relationships are bridges, not destinations. They are meant to get you from one place to another, not to anchor you there. Abraham had to leave Lot behind to reach his full promise. Lot wasn't evil. He just wasn't assigned to Abraham's destiny. As long as Abraham tried to bring Lot along, there was conflict and confusion. The moment he let Lot go, God spoke again and renewed the promise. That's a reminder that sometimes God won't reveal the next part of his plan until you release what's no longer aligned with it. It's human nature to cling to what's familiar. We think that if something started with God, it must be meant to last forever. But some things were meant to bless you for a season, teach you a lesson, or prepare you for a greater mission. God's purpose is progressive. He moves you from glory to glory, from level to level, from assignment to assignment. What was right in one season can become restrictive in another. Just because something was ordained doesn't mean it's permanent. The manna that fed Israel in the wilderness was from God, but when they reached the promised land, it stopped falling. Why? Because God had moved them into a new provision for a new place. You have to be discerning enough to recognize when a season is over. Staying connected to what God has already finished can delay what he wants to start next. Sometimes we keep trying to breathe life into something God has already declared finished. You can't resurrect what God has released. And if you keep holding on, you'll find yourself drained, frustrated, and confused, wondering why peace is left. Peace often leaves when purpose has moved on. God's Spirit brings calm when you're aligned with his will, but agitation when you're stuck in what he's already outgrown. The enemy loves to keep believers trapped in expired attachments because he knows that as long as you're bound to what was, you can't embrace what is. He doesn't need to destroy you if he can distract you. And nothing distracts like staying connected to something that no longer carries divine weight. That's why you need spiritual discernment to ask God, is this still my assignment? Or has it served its purpose? Because if it's no longer your assignment, no amount of effort will make it flourish again. When God shifts your assignment, it's not rejection, it's redirection. He's not taking something away to hurt you. He's transitioning you to something that aligns with your next level of purpose. The problem is that we often confuse loyalty with longevity. You can be loyal to a person's job or dream, but that doesn't mean it's meant to last forever. Loyalty must never override obedience. If God says, it's time to move, then staying put becomes disobedience, even if your intentions are good. God is not a God of stagnation. He's a God of seasons. And seasons are defined by change. The tree that refuses to shed its leaves in autumn won't make room for new growth in spring. Likewise, you must be willing to release certain attachments when their time is up. Don't mourn what's ending. Celebrate what it accomplished. Every attachment that fulfilled its assignment has done its job. When you can bless it and let it go, you're showing God that you trust his timing more than your emotions. So remember this truth, not every attachment is an assignment. Some things were meant to start your story, but not stay in it. When you discern that difference, you'll stop forcing connections and start flowing in divine direction. God is too wise to waste your time and too loving to let you stay where you no longer belong. You cannot step into the new things God has for you while your hands are still full of what he's asking you to release. When God wants to bless you, he often begins by making you empty. That's because fullness can't come to a heart that's cluttered. You can't receive new blessings while holding on to old burdens, and you can't experience divine renewal while still clinging to expired seasons. Letting go is God's way of preparing you to receive something greater, something that requires both faith and space. Every time God transitions you, he first tests your trust. He wants to see if you're willing to make room before he sends rain. Think of the widow in 2 Kings 4. Her house was almost empty, and all she had was 1 jar of oil. But the prophet told her to gather as many empty vessels as she could because God was about to fill them. The oil didn't start flowing until there was emptiness. Likewise, God can't fill what you refuse to empty. If you want new blessings, you must be willing to create the space for them. Letting go is not just a physical act, it's a spiritual declaration that says, Lord, I trust you enough to release what's behind me because I believe what's ahead of me is better. Too often we miss the next move of God because we keep revisiting old ones. We look back on what was and wonder why the new hasn't arrived yet, but God doesn't operate in backward faith. His blessings flow forward. You can't walk into the promised land while you're still looking back at Egypt. Every time you hold on to a past season, you block the flow of a future blessing. God told Joshua that Moses was dead, not because Joshua didn't already know, but because Joshua needed to move on. He couldn't lead Israel into the land of promise while mourning what had ended. God was teaching him that honoring the past is good, but holding on to it is dangerous. There comes a time when you must stop crying over what's gone and start preparing for what's coming. You can't receive new strength if your energy is tied to old sorrow. Letting go also requires humility. It means acknowledging that you don't know better than God. Sometimes the thing you're holding seems too valuable to release. It could be a relationship, a position, or even an identity you've built over time. But God knows when something has reached its expiration date. He knows when what used to bless you has begun to bind you. He knows when the very thing you prayed for in one season has become the thing that's blocking your growth in another. When he tells you to release it, it's not rejection, it's redirection. You have to believe that whatever God is preparing for you is worth what he's asking you to release. The enemy will whisper that you're losing too much, but God is saying you're making room for more. The truth is you can't hold both faith and fear, both peace and pain, both destiny and delay. One must go for the other to grow. Letting go is not easy because it feels like death. But in God's economy, death always precedes resurrection. What feels like an ending is often the beginning of something extraordinary. When you finally surrender what you've been clinging to, you'll realize God was never trying to take something from you. He was trying to give something to you. You'll see that what you thought was loss was actually liberation. The empty hands you feared would leave you powerless will become the same hands God uses to receive his promise. The blessing you've been waiting for isn't delayed. It's simply waiting for you to make space. So if you're in a season where God is asking you to release, don't resist. Let go of the familiar. Release the fear of the unknown and trust the one who holds your future. Every letting go in the kingdom is preparation for a greater receiving. The moment you make room for him, he'll fill you with more than you ever imagined. There are moments in life when something ends so suddenly that it shakes the foundation of everything you thought you knew. A dream falls apart, a door closes, a relationship fades, or a plan you've invested years in collapses. It feels like loss, like failure, like the end of your story. But with God, endings are never just endings. They are divine beginnings disguised in pain. When something dies in your life, it's often because God is preparing something new to live. What feels like the end of your purpose may actually be the setup for the next phase of his plan. God often uses painful endings to position you for powerful beginnings. Look at Joseph's life. His brothers betrayed him, his reputation was ruined, and his freedom was taken. Everything he thought he'd build was torn away. But behind that loss was God's hidden hand directing him toward the palace. What looked like a breakdown was actually a breakthrough in disguise. God allowed Joseph to be stripped of everything because he was preparing to give him something greater, authority, wisdom, and influence beyond his imagination. That's how God works. He removes what you think you need so that he can replace it with what will fulfill your destiny. We often pray for God to open doors, but rarely do we thank him for the ones he closes. Yet it's the closed doors that protect us from the wrong opportunities, the wrong people, and the wrong timing. The problem is, when you're standing at a closed door, it's hard to believe another one will open. That's where faith comes in. Faith doesn't deny the pain of an ending, but it refuses to stop walking because of it. Faith says, even though this chapter has closed, I trust the author to keep writing. When something ends, God is not trying to hurt you. He's inviting you to trust him at a deeper level. He knows that as long as you stay attached to what's over, you'll never reach what's next. Israel had to leave Egypt before they could enter the promised land. Naomi had to leave Moab before she could walk into Bethlehem with Ruth. Each of them had to let go of what was dying so they could step into what God was birthing. The same is true for you. What you call a loss, God calls a transition. What you see as a dead end, he sees as a detour toward destiny. Endings also expose where your trust truly lies, when the thing you depended on is taken away. Do you collapse in despair or lean into God's sovereignty? Sometimes God has to remove your earthly support so you'll lean on heavenly strength. He allows certain things to fall apart so that you'll realize he's the only one who never will. If everything always went your way, you'd never know that he's faithful when life isn't. You'd never learn that peace is not the absence of storms, but the presence of Christ in them. It's okay to grieve the ending. God never asks you to ignore the pain, But he does ask you to trust his purpose in it. Every seed that produces fruit must first die. The death of your dream, the loss of your plan, the heartbreak you didn't expect, those are all the soil where new life grows. You can't have resurrection without crucifixion. What feels like loss today may one day become the foundation of your testimony. When you finally look back, you'll see how every painful ending had divine fingerprints all over it. You'll realize that God wasn't destroying your life. He was redirecting it. He was tearing down walls to make room for windows of opportunity. So don't fear the endings. They are often God's hidden beginnings. When one door closes, another will open, not because you forced it, because God ordained it. Your story isn't over. It's just turning the page. And when God turns the page, what comes next will always make sense of what came before. Letting go is more than a command. It's an act of healing. When you release what has been weighing you down, you make space for God to restore what was broken inside you. Many people carry emotional wounds that never heal because they refuse to let go of the things that caused them. They replay the offense, rehearse the disappointment, or relive the failure, not realizing that holding on keeps the wound open. God can't heal what you keep clutching. Healing begins when you release it. When you finally let go, peace comes rushing in like a flood because freedom always follows surrender. God never designed you to live bound by bitterness, fear, or regret. Yet these are the very chains that form when you refuse to release the past. Bitterness keeps you trapped in yesterday's pain. Fear keeps you from tomorrow's promise. And regret keeps you from today's peace. You cannot move forward while dragging the weight of what's behind you. The longer you hold on, the heavier it becomes. But the moment you lay it down at God's feet, the burden lifts and your spirit breathes again. Letting go isn't weakness. It's strength under surrender. It's saying, God, I can't fix this, but I trust that you can. Think of the woman with the issue of blood. For 12 long years, she suffered. Physically, emotionally, and socially, she had spent all she had, tried everything she could, but nothing worked. It wasn't until she let go of her own effort and reached out to touch Jesus that healing finally came. Her miracle didn't start with striving. It started with surrender. That's how God heals. He doesn't need your control. He needs your trust. The healing you've been waiting for may be on the other side of your release. Sometimes the reason your heart stays wounded is because you keep reopening it. You can't heal while still holding on to the thing that hurt you. When you keep replaying the offense, you give the pain power to stay alive. But forgiveness breaks that power. Forgiveness doesn't excuse what happened. It frees you from it. It's the act of saying, you no longer control my peace. When you forgive, you take your heart out of the enemy's hands and place it back into God's. That's when real healing begins. Letting go also means releasing control over how things should have turned out. Many people live in silent frustration because their lives didn't follow the script they wrote. They keep holding on to what should have been instead of embracing what God is doing now. But peace doesn't come from understanding everything. It comes from trusting the one who does. God doesn't always give explanations, when he always gives restoration. When you let go of your version of the story, he begins to rewrite it with grace. Healing comes in stages. At first, it hurts to release. It feels like you're giving up a part of yourself. But slowly, God begins to replace your pain with purpose. The things that once broke you begin to shape you. The tears that once weakened you become the water that grows your faith. That's how God turns pain into power, through the process of letting go. You'll know healing has come when you can think about what happened and no longer feel the sting. When you can remember without resentment, when you can speak about it and still feel peace, that's when you've truly healed. God never wastes a wound. Every scar tells a story of survival, of grace, of how he brought you through what was meant to destroy you. But he can't turn your wounds into wisdom until you release the hurt into his hands. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing freedom over bondage. The same God who allowed the pain has the power to redeem it. So stop holding on to what he's already healed. The past may explain you, but it doesn't define you. When you let go, you make room for peace to stay. joy to return, and healing to flow freely through your life again. When you surrender to God, you invite His power to take over. There's a level of victory you will never experience until you stop fighting for control and start yielding to His will. Many people spend their lives struggling, worrying, and striving because they're trying to fix things that only God can handle. They pray for miracles but hold on to management. They ask God to move but won't move out of the way. True surrender means releasing your plans, your fears, and your timeline, and trusting that His ways are higher than yours. When you surrender, you're saying, God, I don't just want you to bless what I'm doing, I want to do what you're blessing. The reason surrender is powerful is because it shifts authority. As long as you're in control, you're limited to your own strength. But when you hand it over to God, you access supernatural resources that go beyond human ability. That's when the impossible becomes possible. The Red Sea didn't part until Moses lifted his hands in obedience. The walls of Jericho didn't fall until the people shouted in faith. The breakthrough didn't come because of their power, it came because of their surrender. When you stop trying to make things happen your way, you give God permission to move in His way, and His way is always better. Surrender doesn't mean inactivity, it means alignment. It's not about sitting still, it's about walking in step with God's Spirit. You're no longer reacting out of fear or impulse. You're responding in faith. When Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, facing the cross, He prayed, "Not my will, but yours be done." That prayer didn't make His situation easier, but it positioned Him for purpose. Because of His surrender, salvation was released to the world. Your surrender might feel costly, but it's the key to releasing God's power in your life and the lives of others. Sometimes God will wait until you stop struggling before He steps in. As long as you're trying to control the outcome, He'll let you. But when you finally lift your hands and say, "Lord, I can't, but you can," that's when He moves. The same God who spoke creation into existence doesn't need your help. He needs your humility. The greatest miracles are birthed not in striving, but in submission. God doesn't respond to pride. He responds to surrender. When you bow, heaven moves. Surrender also changes how you see your battles. When you're surrendered, you stop fighting people and start fighting in prayer. You realize that the real war isn't external, it's spiritual. You stop trying to control outcomes and start trusting God with outcomes. You understand that victory doesn't come by force, but by faith. The moment you surrender, you position yourself under divine covering. That's where peace lies. That's where clarity comes. That's where power flows. When you surrender, you stop living from pressure and start living from presence. You no longer have to figure out how everything will work. You just have to stay close to the one who does. It's like a child holding a parent's hand. The child doesn't know where they're going, but they know who's leading them. That's the peace of surrender. It's not knowing the path, it's knowing the guide. You'll never experience the fullness of God's power while clinging to your own plans. God can't bless what you won't give Him. When you surrender, you release the limits on what He can do through you. Your yes opens doors that striving never could. Your obedience invites favor, protection, and purpose. It doesn't mean life becomes easy. It means life becomes ordered.